Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 114. It's Saturday night, and it is several degrees below freezing.
Yes.
I don't know what it is right now.
25.
But 25. Well, that's actually significantly warmer than it was.
Yeah, it was super cold this morning.
Yeah, this morning I was on my way to the gym, and it was -9.
Oh.
It fluctuated between -9 and -7. And it was crazy because, I come out of my house, and it was obviously significantly colder than it typically is, but there were certain things that I noticed that for example, just my door opening, it sounded like the door itself was going to shatter from my house because it was so frozen. And even my mailbox slot, which is right on my front porch, is frozen shut.
Yep.
And even hearing the ground, walking on it, it sounded so different. It was awful.
Yeah, because this is the first real cold we've had this year. We've had some 30s, but nothing down in the single digits.
No, I think you're right. I think it's the first time we've been in the single digits, and certainly the first time we've been in the negatives since the entire winter. And it's supposed to be this all week, though.
Yeah, we're supposed to have five more days of this real cold.
And then Monday, I'm sure anybody listening in the East Coast is familiar with this. On Monday, we got that horrific snowstorm.
Yep.
Which I think for us, it was actually worse a lot of other places, but for us in rural northeastern Ohio, we got 13 inches, 12 inches, somewhere around there.
Yeah, anywhere between 10 and 13 is what I've seen.
Yeah, I know it was a lot worse other places. So I shouldn't complain, but regardless, it took me honestly, I think 4 hours of shoveling worth.
Yeah. And
felt like I made minimal progress because my driveway is not that long, and my sidewalk / patio porch area is not that long either.
Yeah.
But it just took so long because it was so heavy, and obviously I could barely get out my door. I mean, it's up past my knees.
Yeah,
I step out there. So
I still haven't shoveled over all my stuff.
I
shoveled the driveway, and I shoveled a good path across our porch.
Yeah.
And then obviously over to the smoker because we use that all the time.
And that was my original intention, was just to do what was absolutely necessary, uncover my car, get my car literally to get out of the driveway, and that's it. And then a path to the front door. And then just by nature of how I am, I wanted to complete it. And I just kept going and going, and then pick back up the next day. So eventually it all got done, but it was probably about 4 hours on that first day. It would have been Monday.
Yep.
Monday morning, I woke up, and I prolonged it, dude. I get up and I look outside, and that was probably about the last on my list of things that I wanted to do that day, but probably top on the list of things that I needed to do that day.
Yeah.
Because literally would not have been able to physically leave the house had I not shoveled and been able to get my car out. And
you're legitimately trapped.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even, actually, when I first went out, I couldn't even open my car door because the snow was up past the level
of the bottom
of the bottom of the door.
Yeah, I did not get the luxury of prolonging it. I got a fire call.
Yeah.
At 4:00 in the morning, so I ran out my front door, and I have a metal roof, so all the snow had slid off the top of the roof in front of my front door, and I tripped over the 4-foot high pile of snow and face planted in the snow in shorts and a t-shirt. So that was really fun. And
I don't see how people do this with regularity. People who live in, geographically speaking, much colder, significantly colder climates, there's no way. But I know people say that about us too.
Yeah. People
in southern climates say, I don't know how you guys deal with snow, period.
Right.
But again, as aforementioned, it's generally not that cold. Normally, it's amazing too when we do get up to even today, for example, in the 20s feels somewhat manageable now.
Yeah.
It feels normal just because we've spent this whole week. And it's actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to continue to be in the negatives. And that's real temperature. That's not wind chill, obviously. That's just legitimately what the temperature is outside currently.
What do they call that? A polar vortex, I think, is what the news people were calling it. Something like that. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, the negatives are just bone chilling.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It makes you want to move. At least for me personally. Yeah. It makes me want to just completely uproot myself and go away from cold. And it's like we've mentioned in other episodes, this is where it's actually difficult because it's easy to give the illusion of hard work and give the illusion of discomfort when certain things aren't really, it's easy for you to say it's uncomfortable when it's uncomfortable to other people. For example, the thing that we've brought up is heat.
Yeah.
Like you and I like extreme heat. So it would be very easy for us to pat ourselves on the back and say, look how hardcore we are because we train in the extreme heat.
Right.
But that's actually not uncomfortable for us like it is for other people. That is comfort.
Right.
So truly, if I wanted to test my fortitude, I would be outside doing anything other than sprinting to the car trying to warm it up. And that's what I do because like it was so bad that I have an automatic start on my car that doesn't turn it on all the way. It just puts it in idle and has the defroster's going a little bit, but it's completely ineffective in terms of like heating up my car when it's that cold.
Right.
Like if it's 30 and stuff, I'll get it and it'll be warm. Whereas I'll go run outside and actually have to start my car, turn the heated seats on, turn the heat on full blast. And when it's in the negatives, I'll come back probably 10 minutes later and it still feels equally as cold. Like it did not make any progress.
Yeah, it takes a long time, it seems like, for them to heat up.
Yeah.
When it's that cold out. Like the antifreeze takes a long time to warm up and get to where your car will actually generate heat. Like I just drove here to meet with you and the truck's only been sitting for, I don't even know, 2 hours.
Yeah.
And it's just now, after we've been sitting here for a while, starting to warm up.
Well, and plus too, like, there are other things that go along with the cold weather that are inconveniencing, specifically from a training mentality too, or a training approach. So when I get to the gym, it literally takes me longer to warm up, like in the literal sense of body core temperature needing elevated and warming up. And you can kind of feel it in your progressions, like when I'm warming up and just regardless of what I'm doing, especially if I'm squatting.
Yeah.
Like when it's cold out, my knees and hips feel tighter. And I don't know if that's a product of old age or just a product of different pressures or whatever, but I definitely feel so much better when I'm literally warmed
up. Yeah.
Going into the gym.
When it's cold out like this, I think it's a good time to quote Chad, our training partner. It's every workout's like a shock the system kind of day.
Yeah. Yeah. And, ultimately, the goal would be to get to the point where you don't have to warm up. I actually had that conversation with somebody the other day about how, in an ideal scenario, we shouldn't have to warm up. In terms of how we approach weight training or strength training, really the only warm up that you should have should be neurological based.
Right.
So, having the nervous system start to slowly upregulate and turn on, in a sense, for lack of a better phrase, in order to handle heavy load. So, if I bench press 400 pounds. I can't just go put on 400 pounds. My body has to be used to having the loading of that weight. So you start with 100 or 150 and 200 and 250 and slowly build yourself to acclimate your nervous system. But as far as range of motion goes and mobility and blood flow, those are things that, again, ideal utopian type of scenario, which isn't realistic for most people. That's where you should be. Right. You shouldn't have to warm up because think about like when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to warm up to do anything. Like, now I can't just go sprint. That would be completely unrealistic for me. But when you're a kid, you sprint all the time without thinking I have to warm up to sprint.
Yeah.
And I look at that's kind of something that I've really noticed. So the way that I work, I'm sure I mentioned this a multitude of times on the podcast on different episodes, but I've noticed that I'm 32 now and I can do the same things that I could do before. In terms of athletic performance, to a degree, obviously. I can't jump as high. I'm not as strong, like all those things. But my performance hasn't dipped that far. The only difference is it takes me longer to be able to do those things.
Right.
So I can still jump relatively high, but I can't just do it. I have to warm up and go through progressions. And likewise with sprinting and likewise with heavy lifting and all these things where, like, if I want to pick up basketball when I was in college or high school, I could just do it. Whereas now it takes me seemingly 15 minutes worth of mobility work to get my body primed to be able to do it.
Right.
So that's something that I need to be a little bit more diligent with. And we talked about it briefly with not too briefly, but it was one of the things we hit on with Dr. Tyler on our last episode was how movement is the foundation of every performance marker and everything that we do as human organisms. And when you look at everything strength training related, it's all man-made exercises.
Right.
So like the bench press, the squat, the deadlift, even though they're functional movement patterns in terms of joint synergy and how our body muscular system works together to pick up things or to squat down, those are man-made movements in a stationary setting. Mm-hmm. Whereas our bodies were designed to load and move in multiple planes synergistically at the same time. So how often do we incorporate different lunge variations and stuff with heavy loading?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's why I like Bud Jeffrey so much. You turned me on to following him, and he does so much stuff where it's out of the ordinary.
Yes.
But to the complete extreme.
Yes.
If it's grabbing a hold of 4 different kettlebells and a dumbbell at the same time with one hand and snatching it above his head, and then shooting a bow and arrow with his foot in his hand.
Yeah.
The offhand. Like it's insane some of the stuff he does, but if you think about it, it's training to be back to our primal state.
Of course.
And that's and it's so functionally like intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I like really enjoy doing, and I think that's why I like doing like and I'm not saying in any kind of way that I'm strongman, but like the strongman lifts, like the log press, and carrying the stones and the shield and that kind of stuff. I love that idea because
things that incorporate, I guess the one way because I know what you mean in terms of strongman modalities, but the one way you could word it for the listeners would be non-stationary.
Right, like movement based.
Yeah, so you're not lying on a bench or sitting on a bench or standing in a singular position. It's carrying things, pressing things while moving. So there's almost to a degree, I use this term pretty loosely, but almost like an agility type of skill set necessary for strongman training.
Yeah, because like in my mind, if you can do those things, agility stuff, under a load, what can you do without a load? You know what I mean? Where is your fitness really at when you're not loaded with additional weight? That's something that is incredible to me, and that's a goal of mine, is to at some point in life be able to do those things that are like strongman centered, and then test that, likewise test it later.
Yeah.
Like see what it's like to do the movement with load and then do the movement without load and see how much you change.
Yep.
And how much better you get.
So it's interesting because you can think about that leads me to think about how our mentality is to strength training, about always pushing yourself, always trying to do more weight, more reps, more whatever, just progressively self-improving.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder why we don't do that in terms of movement, eliciting more range of motion, trying to move more efficiently, trying to even things like jump higher and run faster, like the foundational movements. That's why I think it's important for people to train to be athletic, even if they have no desire to be athletic, because those are going to be the ways that you kind of prolong your have a little bit better longevity.
And I'd like to kind of interject there. I don't know any person that doesn't have a need and like a necessity, like have an actual need to be somewhat athletic.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to be able to throw a ball or run routes and catch passes and hit a layup, but athleticism's not limited to actual sports. It's like you said, it's running, jumping. Like those are parts of everyday life that, in today's society especially, we get away from so much.
Well, it makes me wonder too, like if you took the general population and you put us all, if somehow hypothetically you were be able to get rid of all civilized structures, like the infrastructure and the luxuries that we have, and we all went to the wilderness, how many of us are going to be able to survive? How many of us can climb trees? How many of us can hunt? How many of us can kill things? How many of us can run fast enough to get away from predators, or the opposite, run fast enough to get to prey, or what have you? I think from an athletic performance standpoint, now I don't have the nature skills to be able to track or hunt or things like that. But as far as like the physical attributes that would be necessary for me to survive, I think that I'm well-rounded enough to be able to do that. Yeah. At least more so than, certainly more so than the average person, but even more so than most people, I would think.
Right.
That's why I'm sorry to interrupt. That's why I got so hooked on those, not because I thought necessarily about being put into the wild in that type of scenario, but that's why I got so hooked on those Spartan races and those Tough Mudders and those obstacle course races this summer, because it kind of incorporated all of the athletic modalities that you would need in order to do something like that. You have to have endurance from the running. You have to be fast to maneuver the obstacles. You have to be strong because of all the loaded carrying.
Right.
And to a degree, you needed to be flexible because you're climbing over things and moving under things. And there's a high degree of skills that are necessary. You can't just be strong or can't just have good endurance. You have to be so well-rounded as an athlete that those are why I kind of fell in love with those things, because it kind of tested me in all those different areas.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's why I like long to want to do those, because it'll give me a sense of feeling like everything's paying off.
Yes.
Everything's for a reason. And, doing all the training that we do, training for, anywhere between 4 and 7 days a week, at times, that's like a goal, like a payoff goal, is to be able to functionally do things that I can't do right now.
And I think there's no need to aim small when it comes to specific physique goals or performance goals, because I think that having a broader sense will kind of engender those ambitions or those goals a little bit quicker anyway. So if you have a goal to just look good and you train to just look good, I feel like I've made the most progress when I've incorporated other sub goals.
Yeah.
So not just trying to look good, but trying to run fast, trying to jump high, trying to be strong, and trying to look good. There's kind of synergy between those goals where I feel I make more progress. I know it sounds counterintuitive and unlikely, but like if you're just training to be strong, I feel like I've made the most progress when I've incorporated other things than just trying to be strong.
No, I agree with that one 150%, because, and I have like fact-based evidence behind this. The most weight loss that I have sustained is when I was training for two different things at the same time. Strength training.
Yep.
And endurance races.
Yeah.
When I was running on a daily basis, trying to be competitive, and when I say competitive, I mean with myself, meaning be faster every time I do it.
Yeah.
And then also every time I go to the gym, the goal was to be stronger and to look better and to lose weight and to get into a better physique. Right? So whenever I have switched and only ran or switched and only strength trained, the progress is not even remotely the same.
Yeah.
It's like less than half. It's negligible. Like you don't even see it almost. It takes so much longer when you're focused on one thing. If you broaden, like you said, your spectrum up and look at like multiple areas of your life that you can improve at once, it gives you a bigger sample.
Yes.
I think that's a good explanation. I don't know. I mean, maybe my it's working in my head, but yeah, like that, have a bigger sample size to be able to track.
Well, and I think that you could get into the physiology, but it's more of an analogy for other areas of life too, where when, in my estimation, and the people that we've networked with over the years of this podcast, that successful people tend to be well-rounded in the sense of not necessarily skill set. So if you want to be the best at something, certainly at some point you have to be myopically focused on whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
But that success breeds success in other areas of their life. So if someone is a very successful business person, a lot of times, and I know that there are for sure cases where it's the opposite, but a lot of times they are well-rounded in other areas of their life as well. So I think that, I don't know if that's the attention to detail or the hard work approach that is transferable to other areas or whatever, but I feel like if I can work very hard at strength training, I can also work very hard in other avenues, and it pays off. So speaking of the gym, why don't we go to a commercial break, and then you and I can give a couple of training updates about the gym stuff when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we're back from our commercial break. All right, prior to the break, we said we would give some training updates, and I know that Well, on my end, I'll be brief because there's not a lot to update. Just been, you actually helped me send progress pictures to my coach, so that's something that is going to serve as furthering accountability on my end. And generally, no training updates are good training updates. That just means that we're being consistent and doing the things that I need to do. Likewise with yourself, you are as well, but you have a little bit more of an update or some news to share on that side of things. So kind of update everybody with what's going on with you.
So Seth Feroci, the owner of Axe and Sledge Supplements.
Now let me interject here. Seth Feroci too now is known as the owner of Axe and Sledge Supplements, and he's the CEO of that company, and he's a pretty big name on social media. And I remember growing up when I was getting into bodybuilding that I remember Seth Feroci, the professional bodybuilder, who was winning, like turned pro as a younger kid and won multiple shows. And I've seen the professional athlete side of him as well, long before he kind of came into more mainstream eye with the supplement company. But I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. I agree. I think that's worth mentioning too, because when you're a professional bodybuilder, you obviously have hard working ethic.
Yes.
And that ties right into the update here. So Axe and Sledge Supplements, Seth Feroci is putting on their second annual HWMF challenge. So part of their brand is one of their slogans is the hardworking MFer, so to speak. So the challenge is the HWMF challenge, and it's 8-week challenge, and it's a total body transformation. So,
which 8 weeks to put into context is a lot of time, but not a lot of time.
Right.
I mean, that's 2 months.
It's 2 months. So, you have to go. Basically what we always say, it's time to go. We got to get after it. You have to try your best and put every ounce of effort you can into it, or you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
You're not going to make the transformation to make the cut to win the money.
Yep.
And
the prize money is $15,000.
Yeah. So each category makes $15,000, and then there's some bonus money for different posing stuff for the most shredded category.
Yes.
I entered in the overall male body transformation. We're 1 day out of a weekend, and I feel good. I feel like I've lost, a significant amount of weight would be hard to say. I'm not sure what I'm down right now. I know at 3 days in, we were 3 pounds down.
Yep. And you're doing, just to hit on that before we go on, because I'll forget to circle back to it. You are weighing in on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Yeah.
So twice a week, not just because your check-in days are Sundays.
Sundays are check-in.
And you're doing it on Wednesdays too, just to make sure that we're getting that midweek measurement, just to make sure we don't go the whole week without minimal progress or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my goal and plan this week is 8 to 16 pounds.
Yep.
If we don't hit that goal, we're going to make drastic changes, which we don't normally do.
Yeah.
We normally would do things really incrementally, but
I'm glad you brought that up. That's really important to stress, because Justin and I, full transparency, have had this conversation prior to this, because he consulted me obviously before doing this, and the plan of attack that we have is pretty drastic. It's not, and you and I was the one who brought it up and phrased it as such, but I knew that you agree, and you kind of echoed it as well, is this is not the time for sustainability.
Right.
When you have $15,000 on the line, we're going to get down at all costs. Things that may not be that will not be sustainable long-term, as far as caloric restriction, may not be what people would look and say, oh, that's too few of calories, or that's not healthy enough, or whatever. But given the short-term goal that we have at our disposal here, you kind of have no choice but to, slow and steady in this instance will not win the race, because the race is too short to go slow and steady.
Exactly.
So you and I have both agreed. Now, we'll mention that with the caveat here that nothing is going to be life-threatening.
Right.
I know that should probably go without saying, but you gotta remember that in terms of sports performance specifically, there are people that are willing to do
anything.
Literally anything.
Right.
Yeah, truly, literally anything. So, we'll throw that out there, that Justin is not starving. Right. He is eating 3 meals a day.
Yep.
every day.
Every day.
Hydration is fine. Sleep is
right.
Optimal.
It's the best as it can be.
So like there's not there's and to be fair, I think that I would say at this point cardio, I don't want to say minimal, but cardio is not excessive.
Yeah.
So I mean we're going as slowly as we can while still sprinting, if that makes sense.
So to me the goal was this week was to get acclimated and see what this week looked like with the initial plan.
Yeah.
And I kept the cardio in my back pocket, basically, because I know we can add that in the following week, and then ramp it every week.
Yeah.
And that is it has to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's just no way for it not to. Like, it's science. You know, we do more, we lose more. So, and then if we have to pull food, we'll pull food. And obviously, like you said, we're not going to pull food to where I'm starving to death, but it's 8 weeks. We got to get drastic. We got to make changes.
Yeah, so. and normally if I was working with a client where we would try to mitigate hunger and cravings as much as possible, because there's the reality is that cheating on the diet would become an issue, because they would be a lot more enticed to cheat when they're starving and stuff. Whereas you and I have kind of, again, mutually agreed that at this juncture, you're going to be hungry a lot of the day, and that's something that's just going to happen if you want to make drastic changes in a not so drastic amount of time, because we don't have that long to be able to do this. So it'll be interesting to see how everything the main part that I'm interested in that you and I haven't discussed is performance markers going forward in the short term. So you're eating a lot less calories. You're going to be systemically, body-wise, a lot more stressed, at least in an acute sense, not in a chronic inflammatory response type deal, but acutely you're going to be a lot more stressed. I want to see what your strength is going to do in the short term.
Right.
Just in the immediate. Like, are we going to go down because we're not as well fed? Like, what, just want to see what that does. I see no reason why we can't progress in some things, but certainly you would have to expect that some things will go down too.
I think that overall, win or lose, this is going to give us an incredible amount of data moving forward for the rest of the year.
You know what? I thought the exact same thing as well. Never vocalized it, but certainly was thinking, okay, well, wonder what this is going to give us as far as clues. And maybe even like not necessarily much in my shoes as a physiology, nutritional exercise science type of person to make changes to a plan, but more so on your end saying, what is sustainable and what isn't.
Right.
Because when we're putting in practices right now that may not be sustainable long-term based on what you've been doing.
Right.
So we took a pretty drastic cut down in nutrition, take a pretty drastic cut up in
training,
exercise and training. So upregulate training, downregulate the amount of calories you're getting. So it would look pretty drastic, but maybe we get to the end of this and after the 8 weeks, you're feeling better than you've ever felt in your whole life.
Right.
Because the thing to consider here is, even though we're doing drastic things, drastic for the better is what's going to be happening to your body.
Right.
You're going to be losing a lot of excess body weight and body fat. So maybe this is actually ironically going to be sustainable for you.
Yeah.
Longer than 8 weeks.
It might, it may very well stick around longer. And like we discussed, if at the end of 8 weeks I'm completely burnt, we will reverse diet to a more sustainable diet.
Yes.
Over the course of a few weeks, and then it'll just be business as usual.
And I have no problem, me personally, and again, it's not my body, but I have no problem if we lose a considerable amount of weight and have to put a little bit back on to kind of put us back on track. But I wouldn't be able to kind of go to bed comfortably with myself and know that we left $15,000 potentially on the table because of lack of effort.
Right.
So, if someone just comes out and makes more progress than you, then God bless them, because you know how hard you're going to work. So you can kind of
sleep at night.
Yeah, you could go to bed and go to sleep happy knowing, well, man, I gave everything I could. So I know for darn sure this dude or this girl gave everything they had as well. So there's a little bit comfort in that, but there's not comfort, at least in my mentality, of we didn't do everything humanly possible.
I agree. So on that note, where we were talking about when you had mentioned it would be ironic to see how strength goes up or down, and what is going to make progress or not. It was early on in the week, but we had a push session that it wasn't a overall PR by any stretch. It was close to the best I've done in the last 10 months.
Yeah.
Benching 255 was solid, especially after that session. Boy, that was
where we worked up with our warm up was a 50 rep set, a 40 rep set, a 30 rep set, a 20 rep set, a 10 rep set. And then after that, that's when we started going into like heavy work, like triples and singles.
Right. So that was, a really encouraging for me, because I was concerned, honestly, about the same.
Sure.
I was concerned that we weren't going to be feeding the workouts enough. And he had even thought about, because we pulled carbs from every meal but the last one.
Yeah.
So I was considering the thought of if we were going to need to introduce intra-workout carbs at some point.
Well, really quickly, before we close up shop, let's actually tell people what we're doing. As far as, I think that would be interesting to people, because so we said we're doing 3 meals a day. So that's the first thing. We have a gallon of water. Well, let's start with that. Gallon of water every day, right?
A minimum
of gallon of water. So we're extremely well hydrated. We'll take into consideration electrolyte balance, salting the food, stuff like that, to make sure that sodium is well kept in the nutrition plan. 3 meals a day. First meal is protein, fat, vegetables.
Yep.
Second meal, protein, fat, vegetables. Third meal is protein, high carbohydrate, relatively speaking, and vegetables.
Yeah, no fat.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing right now. You've been we're not measuring macros actually currently. I mean, I know you keep track of calories and stuff through your, I believe through MyFitnessPal and stuff. So we know about where we're at, but food choices are not staying consistent. Aside from, I know that you've kind of been on this, we're not mandating that they stay specific.
Right.
So protein sources can vary, but I know that you've kind of been on this fish kick lately. So we've been doing a lot of fish. But if you wake up tomorrow morning and want chicken and vegetables, then you're going to have chicken and vegetables. Right. It's not like we have to stick with chicken, have to stick with fish, but I guess there is consistency in the fact that you've been liking fish lately. So.
Yeah. So it's such a good, clean source of protein that even if I stop liking it, I think I'm going to stick around with this throughout the challenge, just because the calories are low on it.
Yes.
Protein's high.
Yes.
Fat's low.
Yes.
It just makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense to win. Mm-hmm. So, let's go with what makes sense. And even though I have chickens, I've been buying egg whites, because egg whites, same way, it's cleaner protein. It's less fat.
Lower calorie.
Exactly. Yep. So, and with my, the one thing that we've kind of battled all along in this journey was I used to eat so much that my stomach volume is very large. Mm-hmm. So I have to fill the void, or I'm feel like I'm starving 4 hours later. So with the egg whites, it's a bigger portion for less calories.
I think that's important to note as well, is food volume, because a lot of people don't understand that concept where, I mean, they do understand it, but it's not something that they readily think about. Mm-hmm. When you're planning a nutrition, for example, I used to drink egg whites, like cartons of egg whites that were pasteurized. And so there's no risk of contamination or illness, like foodborne pathogens or anything like that. But I would always do liquid egg whites as part of my breakfast or, my second meal or whatever. And people would say, that's disgusting. Why don't you cook them? And my issue was that, because again, they're pasteurized, so there's not a bioavailability concern. I couldn't, if I have a carton of egg whites, that's X amount of eggs worth of egg whites. If I scrambled them or cooked them, that would be such a huge portion that physically I would not be able to fit it into my stomach, because when you cook it, it expands and gets fluffy. And so being someone who's trying to get more food, I wouldn't be able to fit it in. So I would have to drink it just because it sits in my stomach and takes up less space. Right. Therefore, I can fit other foods in more readily.
Right.
Now, right now, you're essentially the opposite, where you're trying to accrue a lot of food into your stomach to take up more space and more food volume. So a lot of green vegetables are a low calorie option to do that. Fish, in order to get a lot of calories from fish, you have to, it's virtually impossible to get high calories from fish. You have to eat millions of pounds, it seems
And
like.
I honestly think that's why I like the fish so much, because with chicken, I eat 4 to 6 ounces per serving. So with fish, I'm eating 10 to 12 ounces.
Yeah.
And getting the same, it's basically, the macros are almost the same.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes sense.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, it makes sense from the point of this challenge, or this goal that we have, but it also just makes sense in the long term, even as well. So I think it's cool, man. I think that I'm trying to do as much as I can in terms of, because the plan's really set and there's not really much I need to do in that regard, but I've just been trying to throw little nuggets, almost kind of like a reminder at what's at stake.
Yeah.
So like I'll just randomly text Justin and say $15,000. That's all I'm going to say, because it's kind of like when we talked about setting our alarm clocks at certain hours, just because so when it goes off, it's like, oh wait, what am I doing right now? How am I doing it? You're going through that kind of a self-assessment checklist. And I think that every time you see my name pop up and it says $15,000, what are you eating? What are you doing? Are you moving? Are you being active? Because again, this is one of those things that there's going to be, I mean, what better type of thing to kind of encapsulate what the No Excuse Nation is than an 8-week challenge.
Yeah.
Like, you have no excuse to not give full effort for 8 weeks. This isn't an 8-year thing.
Yeah, it's not the full year.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's an excuse. You know what I mean? Like, even if it was a full year challenge, it's 1 year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's one of anything. You know what I mean? Unless it's one lifetime. You know what I mean? It's measurable.
Well, and I think that it really came, to be honest, in full transparency, again, like we always try to be, I think it came at the right time because you were looking at older pictures.
Yeah.
And you sent me a picture from
2020, February 2020.
February 2020. Okay, so almost 2 years ago.
Yep.
Literally Basically. almost 2 years ago exactly, February 2020. And it was an older picture of just like a rear shot. Like I think it was a rear double bicep pose, just with you flexing your arms from the back in your underwear that we had taken as a progress update at the gym.
Yeah.
And we had just actually maybe 2 days.
Yeah, 2 or 3 days before.
Yeah, it was very, very recently, had taken your initial pictures for this 8-week challenge. So your starting photos, and you came across a picture from 2 years ago and was like, you know,
what the hell?
Yeah, I'm upset.
Yeah.
I'm mad about this.
Yeah.
And my response is, truthfully, you should be. Yeah, like use that anger. You should be mad that this has happened, because when you look at the two pictures, it's kind of like, because I'm the same way actually, at the opposite, where I've gotten smaller instead of, you know, keeping muscle or getting bigger or whatever. But you never notice, if you're trying to be big, you never notice the weight slowly creeping off until you see the pictures. Or if you're trying to be lean, you never notice the weight gaining until you look at pictures, and it's like, I cannot believe I used to look like that compared to what I look like now. And even I told you, I said
that it's what I said.
I forgot that you were that lean at one point. Like it was, so again, use the anger.
Like literally in that picture, you could see my lats.
Yeah.
Like there was physically, you could see lats.
Muscle definition from the backside. Yeah.
And in any picture, in any picture you take now, there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the motivation. You know what I mean? Like typically you guys hear me talk about my motivation as my daughter and my life, my long term. And right now I'm going to be super, super selfish. And I need to be okay with the guy I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
And I think that it's completely okay to say that, because so often we get in this mindset where, okay, here's an analogy I'll give you, like tattoos. So I have no tattoos. I have no desire to get tattoos, and I will never get a tattoo. But one of the things that I hear a lot of times are, well, tattoos are stupid if they don't have meaning, and you should only get a tattoo if it has meaning. And I think that's kind of a silly mentality personally, because why not let the person get what they want?
Yeah.
Like if they have a picture of the lion and it has no personal meaning, but they think it's pretty sweet, then let them get a picture of a lion. Who cares?
Exactly.
So like,
it's not your body.
I think that we are supposed to, and I say that with the air quotes there, we're supposed to give ethical and moral rationale behind our goals. Like, oh, I want to lose weight for my family. Or like take bodybuilders, for example, that I'm familiar with. Oh, well, I do this for self-improvement. And I do the, like, what's wrong with going to the gym because you want to look sweet without a shirt on?
Yeah.
Like, why is that frowned upon?
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about that with from a professional status.
Yeah.
Why is it wrong of me to say I want a good job so I can make lots of money and buy sweet stuff?
Yeah.
Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that that we need to get back to, yeah, like you said, I want to look good. I want to look in the mirror and be happy with who I see.
Well, man, it gets us the perfect spot to input it. To quote Seth Feroci, I want to look good naked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what he says all the time. And it's so true.
Yeah. You can say, because what it is it's a facade that people put on to make their goals and ambitions seem a little bit ethically or morally just or righteous. So like, I don't I don't care about what other people think about my physique. I'm just doing it for self-improvement. You want to do self-improvement? Go read a book.
Yeah.
There's a million other things to do than self-improvement. It's like people who say they want to get into teaching because they like kids, which is a fair reason. I'm not discrediting that. But there are a million other things that you can do that involve children and youth development that you don't have to become a teacher and just say, oh, it's because I like kids.
Right.
I think it's completely fair to say I like teaching because it's a pretty lucrative job considering the hours, the climate control, the summers off, the weekends off, the holidays off. Like there are some perks to being a teacher that it's okay to say that I like it because of that.
Right.
So,
and it's okay to like it because of that.
Yeah, certainly.
It's just, I don't understand that. I like where this went because I don't understand why we always have to do it for, do it for the gram.
Yeah, your reasons are the right reasons.
Yeah, do it.
Whatever your reasons are, who cares? If
Yeah.
that's why you do it, then more power to you. And if you're doing this because you want to win $15,000, awesome. If you're doing it because you want have your daughter look back on this and be proud of something her dad accomplished, awesome. If you're doing it because you want to look better, awesome. If you're doing it because you're very self-conscious and you care what people think about you, awesome.
Right.
Who cares what the reason is as long as it's getting done?
As long as it's getting done. Check. Yeah. That's it.
I think that's a good place to end it right there. Is that's really all it boils down to. As long as you're doing the work, who cares why you're doing it?
Right. Exactly. I like it.
All right. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 114. As always, we appreciate everybody out there listening. And I wanted to take a brief moment before we really close up shop and say, hey, if you guys like the podcast, please share with a friend, share our post. Yes. Please continue to drive traffic to the sites, to both our social media accounts. Like the post, share the post, save the post, all that good stuff. And as always, we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week.